Listener discretion is advised. Strong sexual content warning.
Welcome to Social Disruption, the podcast that rips that Band-Aid off the topics no one wants to talk about. I'm your host, Farrah.
And I'm Cheyenne, and together we're diving deep into one of the most heated debates in today's culture war, pornography and its impact on society.
Should it be legal or illegal? Is it just another form of entertainment? Or is it a destructive force corroding relationships and moral values? What effect do platforms like OnlyFans have on younger generations, relationships, and the overall fabric of society?
And y'all remember Ashley Madison? That was the site that encouraged people to cheat with its shameless slogan, "Life is short, have an affair." What does its existence say about human nature and our evolving views on infidelity?
And to tackle these controversial topics, we have a very special guest joining us tonight, Vic Lagina. If you think you've heard it all about the adult industry, think again. Vic spent 20 years as a producer and director in the world's largest adult entertainment company, witnessing firsthand the rise, fall, and transformation of the industry. He's the author of Filthy, The Rise and Pending Death of Vic. Oh, Vic, don't leave too soon. A brutally honest, no-holds-barred memoir exposing the real, unfiltered side of porn, from the, quote, golden age of the industry to the post-Me Too era. He's seen it all, the good, the bad, and the filthy. But before Vic was deep in the adult world, he was a kid with a story, as we all once were. We're going to take a deep dive into who Vic really is, his childhood, his upbringing, the choices that led him into the industry, and ultimately why he left it behind. Now, this is not just a conversation about porn. It's about morality, capitalism, free will, and the ever-evolving battleground of societal norms. So buckle up, because tonight's episode is guaranteed to make you think, challenge your beliefs, and maybe even make you a little bit uncomfortable. So listener discretion is advised. So Vic, come on out here.
Certainly. And thank you for having me on. I hope I'm coming through nice and clear. And I want to say that was a really good lead up. So thank you for having me.
Oh, our pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. When we do have a guest on, Vic, we always start off with an icebreaker. Here it is. If you could have dinner with any three people, alive or dead, who would it be and why?
Oh boy, that's a good one. You have to delve into those who are no longer with us. I think you have to have a few of those. Honestly, even though I was raised Jewish, I'd like to have a conversation with Jesus Christ. I really would. I would really want to know everything that went down all those years ago. What did we get right? What did we get wrong with the offspring of religion with him? I think that's a good one. Let's see. Musically, I think it would be interesting to talk to someone that is no longer with us, but Johnny Cash. I would like to talk to Johnny Cash. I think Johnny Cash was a cool guy. I think he had a lot of ups and downs personally with his career. I'm a big fan of his. So I'd like to sit down with J.R. Cash. That would be great. And lastly, let's talk with someone political. I think it would be important to do that. I'm not going to say where I'm aligned politically because it's quite all over the place. But I think I would love to talk with Ronald Reagan for some odd reason.
Oh,
Because
yes.
he was definitely a trailblazer in a lot of ways. He was, you could say, responsible for the fall of the Soviet Union. And I guess when it came to the topic we're going to lead into, the morality of the 80s and trying to correct the immorality of the 80s. So I would say him as well, and where his head was during a lot of that. I mean, his wife was the just say no to drugs. I completely did not listen to her, even though she told me a million times on the television that I shouldn't do it. But I think those would be my three answers.
And since you did bring that up, Vic, Do you remember the crack the egg commercial of This Is Your Brain?
Of
This
course.
is your brain on drugs. Any questions?
Correct. I do remember those. And honestly, those are effective. I'd never smoked crack in my life. So I guess they worked.
I have to agree with you. I did not listen to the Just Say No. I'm actually 5 years sober today. Thank you. Thank you all to our listeners who are joining us tonight. You can always download the Podbean app for free and listen. You get an option to come in and chat with us. You can even call in if you ask us a question or even our guest a question. Larry, hello. We got Angel Bear. Hello, my dear. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. So now we've set the stage for tonight's discussion. Let's dive in. Porn, OnlyFans, Ashley Madison. Are they just products of a free society, or are they tearing apart our moral fabric? So, of course, we have Vic here with us, someone who's seen the industry from the inside out, literally. Before we get into the culture war debate, let's start with Vic's story a little bit, and we're going to go back and forth between some questions about Vic's life and talking about this culture war of porn, because understanding where someone comes from gives us a better perspective on where they stand today. So, Vic, starting out early years, take us back. Where did you grow up? What
So
was
I,
your childhood like?
okay, so I grew up on the suburbs of Philadelphia, and I was raised by two Jewish liberals in an area that didn't really have a lot of Jews. In Philadelphia, there's the main line, and that's where all the Jews were. But I was the only Jew in my class. Not exactly comfortable in the skin suit that I was assigned as a kid. Very awkward, huge feet, big lips, crooked teeth, and the only Jew in my class. So I drew a lot of ire, and it wasn't easy until around puberty started to hit, and then things started to come together. But overall, I'd say I came from a healthy household. There wasn't a lot of uptightness about sex or the topic of it. The school system I went to was public school, but one of the best in the state. So had a good education on that front. But aside from that, it was a pretty normal childhood, except for when I lost my mother at age 15, which was the traumatic event in my life. And I think in that situation, because I didn't have a sister, there was a lack of a strong woman role model at a very crucial time. And that affected, I would say, a lot of the relationships I had over the several decades after that. But then after that, my childhood was I wasn't really an exceptional athlete nor a student, A, B student. I was told to do well in school so you can get into a good college. And that's what I did. But my childhood was really about TV shows, movies, video games. I think typical suburban America while we were trying not to get annihilated by a nuclear war with the Soviets. That was my childhood growing up.
And my thoughts and prayers go out to you losing your mother at such a young age, especially 15 years old. That's when, even though a lot of people think that a boy needs their father, they still have that mother for the good relationship talk. I had both my parents for that. So my heart goes out to you for that, Vic. Now, you have multiple film degrees. So what made you choose film as a career?
I guess it really stemmed from my love of movies and making movies. And I went undeclared to Syracuse University in 1991 and I graduated in 95. But they have a really good communication school. So while I was figuring it out my freshman year while getting drunk and making mistakes, I worked my way into that communication school and I found a passion in filmmaking. That's really what I wanted to do. I wanted to write TV shows. I wanted to write movies. I wanted to direct movies. All the dreams that a young man has, I had. And after I graduated from Syracuse in 4 years, I went down to Florida because upstate New York's pretty cold. And I was beaten up by those winters. So I decided to go to South Florida. And I got a job working in corporate and commercial production while I also started getting my second unnecessary production degree at the University of Miami. And I was doing well. I was producing, editing, doing all these things while getting my master's, but it was unfulfilling, I'd say, in a lot of ways, especially if I had dreams about making movies, and it wasn't happening in South Florida.
Since you had a love for film, what are your top 3 films?
So I'd say the movie that did it for me as a kid would be like Empire Strikes Back. I think when I saw that in the theater, it's wow, like what they can do in the movies. That was the one that did it. But the one that really I just had the best time in the movies was Back to the Future. I could still watch that movie anytime it comes on, just because I thought it was brilliant storytelling with endearing characters, and it really did show you the 3 act structure of how a good movie is written and directed and produced. But my all-time favorite, it's so off the wall, but it speaks to me in ways that I cannot comprehend, is The Big Lebowski. Love that movie. I could quote it all day, every day. I watched it literally over 100 times. And I think with that movie, they captured lightning in a bottle when making it, because filmmaking is very hard to do. It's not an easy job. So I have mad respect for The Big Lebowski.
I agree with you. And Jeff Bridges, one of my favorite actors, he played that part spectacular. So I couldn't agree with you more. Now, shifting off Vic a little bit, we're going to start a little round table question about this evening's culture war topic. I'm going to start off with Cheyenne. So, Cheyenne, you know what the topic is about tonight. Question: should porn be illegal, or does banning it infringe on personal, quote, freedoms? And then after you, we will go to Vic. Start off, Cheyenne.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Vic, I want to say, yes, absolutely. I agree with you on both of those movies. Back to the Future holds a very special place in my heart. And The Big Lebowski, the dude, come on, how do you not love it? So to Farrah's question, listen, I think everybody has a right to do what they want to do with their own body and their own skin, their own personal space. If that's an industry that they want to go into, more power to them. I don't think that anybody else has the right to govern what somebody does with their own body. That's my stance on it. I think making it illegal would 100% infringe on people's ability to make their own choices and have free will.
Okay. And Vic, what would you say?
There's no reason to ban or make pornography illegal. I don't see how you could do it, first of all, because there's so many ways of getting around that. What are you going to do? Have the porn police come knocking on doors and writing fines or putting people in jail for writing porn? Don't we have enough on our plate as a country to worry about? But I think if you have porn with respect, with consent, with consideration, there's nothing wrong with it. And in a lot of ways, there are a lot of people out there who are in it. I say, thank God there's a porn industry, because they would not be able to contribute to society in any other way. I mean, I dealt with these people literally for 2 decades. And when I think about it, I'm like, I'm glad there's a sex industry for you to do well, to succeed, to contribute to society, because otherwise, what would you be doing in order to help other than being a drain? I think if you get rid of it, you're going to have a lot of angry, pent up people. And don't we have that enough already?
Oh, for sure. And I guess the question I should have rephrased a little bit differently. It's not so much of making it illegal. It should be at access for anyone that is mature enough to work in the industry, watch it. How do I want to say this? Maybe make it not so as easy to access it for our children, meaning you can go on a website, they can ask your age. Do you think everybody's going to say, I'm 18 years old or 21? I don't know if states have different age ranges for it. But do you think that there should be a little watch over it more? What do you guys feel about that?
Who would you like to answer?
Either one, whoever wants to answer.
Okay, as far as the age verification, I get asked this a lot. And my initial answer used to be a cop out one, where I'm not in the industry anymore. It's not my fight anymore. But the truth is that I listen to a lot of people who had kids, and the accessibility of it is very questionable, especially when you're dealing with the tube sites. Now, I worked for a company that pretty much owns everything, and they also started Pornhub. Pornhub got into a lot of hot water, which is why I think you see a lot of the regulations starting to happen with the tube sites. But before that, you had the adult sites in general, the pay sites where you just put in your credit card. What I find so interesting is that people are so easily willing to give over their credit card information to buy even a porn membership, yet they're so freaked out by putting their information in because they feel that their privacy is going to be infringed upon, that their identity is going to be stolen.
Good.
And I'm thinking that's happening anywhere. You get hacks going on everywhere. So, what is the real issue with people who don't want to submit their ID? That's what I really want to know.
That's a good point. I never looked at it like that. What about you, Cheyenne?
As a mom, I've got a soon to be 15-year-old and an 11-year-old. So it's concerning to me. However, working in public schools and private schools, I know that these young people, they will find a way. How can we regulate it more? I don't know. Maybe Vic has some thoughts on that. I know you said it's not your fight anymore, but I would like to know what you think we could do to put better safeguards on these so that younger people can't get in. Because Farrah said, of course, it's easy to just lie about your age. My 11-year-old wanted to lie about his year of birth to make himself 1 year older to be able to get a TikTok account. When we talk about porn, that's a whole different story. So, what are some regulatory blocks or extra permissions that you think could be put on these sites, especially when there's so much free pornography available out there?
Certainly. So, with the tube sites, particularly Pornhub, and I don't know how much of you've both been following the story of Pornhub and how they were raked through the coals in the early parts of the pandemic when it was exposed in a New York Times article that there were literal trafficking victims of Pornhub. It was a op-ed by Nicholas Kristof, and the result of that was that Pornhub had then pull their Visa and MasterCard transactions because of such outrage about it. And there's a great book written by, her name is Lila Micklethwait. It's called Takedown, that I've read, and I've talked to her. And she was the one who started this whole movement about bringing exposure to the trafficking victims of the tube sites. The tube sites were deliberately set up this way in order to get so much unique traffic that their compliance team that had to pore over the literally millions of pieces of content that was being uploaded by anyone, anyhow, without any kind of proof of IDs, that was done intentionally so that they would be so bogged down so that nefarious content could remain on Pornhub. Now, when you think about that, is some pretty sinister shit. And I am really happy that the third ownership, nor does MindGeek, were raked through the polls and eventually they sold the company. The question is what are they doing now, which is the age verification? Now, you have a lot of states that have age verification laws, and more states are presenting them. It's a good start. But the thing is, Pornhub won't allow access in those states because they don't want to comply with the law. So you have to ask yourself, why is that? And the truth is that because if they were to do that, they would have a huge breakdown in the amount of traffic that would be coming to Pornhub because people don't want to put in their ID. And Pornhub, at least free porn, doesn't have any value if the traffic isn't there. So this new company that bought Pornhub and the rest of the assets, that was MindGeek, I wanted to believe that they would be better, especially because they were called ethical capital partners. But I'm not so sure they are if they don't want to comply with these age verification laws that are being requested by the states in our country.
I do remember something about Pornhub being in the news, but it caught my attention and it flew away as quick as it came in. So I'll have to definitely take a look at that. Coming back to you, Vic, your book, Filthy, as you say, is a true account of your front row seat to the explosive rise of internet porn and its endless class of characters. So apparently, you answered a classified ad seeking production help on a porn shoot. So can you explain that time in your life?
It all started when I was living in Florida, not really comfortable with my existence as a corporate producer. And I met a woman who was going to LA she was a SAG actress and she had her SAG card. And it was an opportunity for us to take on Hollywood so I could fulfill my dream of creating TV shows and movies and everything else. The reality of the situation was it was your typical crash and burn Hollywood story. where I was funding our dreams on my credit cards and I was accumulating debt. I could have worked in LA taking jobs that I was overqualified for, being interns or gophers or assistants. But my ego at the time, when I was 27 years old, wouldn't allow that. So instead, I was doing these Hail Mary passes, which was submitting my script, submitting my ideas to TV studios and companies, and it wasn't going well. And on top of it all, my girlfriend at the time decided that she wanted to stop being an extra and an actor on movie sets, and she wanted to be Feminem, the first white female rapper. And I thought it was a great idea. So much, in fact, that I funded her demo on the credit cards.
Oh my
So,
Lord.
yeah, so you have this piling up of debt and jobs not really becoming very available. So, yes, that one day I answered this ad on adult staffing. That was my first day of porn. And that was in April of 2000. And the whole thing was to make a little bit of money to start getting out of debt. And long story short, and we can delve into it more, was that day led to more days, led to more, and it became this snowball of a business that got me out of debt and put me in a situation where I had this business on my hands and I'm with these guys that are ready to kick the internet's porn industry's ass. So do I play it safe and leave because I'm out of debt? Or do I go behind door number two and I see where this shit show goes? And I chose door number two. I built this business with the mind of having stability and money and seeing how far I could take the crazy train. And that's really how it all started.
So let's expand on that. What were your first experiences like in the business? Was it really glamorous at first, or was there this immediate dark side that you recognized?
What's the opposite of glamorous? Let's think about some words here. Because
Dark
it
and
was,
filthy.
yeah, seedy would be the word I would choose. That first day, and I talk about a lot of this when I go on and I talk to people, but that day pretty much set the stage of how I did not want to run things in the future. I mean, I came from a background where you work hard and you be transparent and you create a safe space and you don't fuck with people's money. You do what you say you're going to do. And that day, it was more like seedy porn, where eventually people that were not part of the production were smoking crack in another room, and I smelled it. And it was just like, I really felt like I needed to bathe after that first day. But it led to more context, which was how do you find leads as a content producer for people who have pay sites? And once I figured that out, and once I left LA because we were no longer able to stay afloat, I returned to Miami and I built the business up. And a lot of the shoots that I was doing in hotel rooms in in Florida, and those were really where I spent my time in the trenches, where I got to be a better shooter and a better pornographer. And I got a little more comfortable in the business and dealing with people that I would meet who were the performers and models who were in it. But it got so busy at a certain point that I did have this business on my hands. And the goal was to make it bigger and better. And that is what I accomplished when I first pulled up to Las Vegas in 2006, when the real story began.
Do you think OnlyFans empowers people financially, or do you think that it creates long-term social and mental consequences? And then Cheyenne, you can go after Vic.
I think it's both. However, I do believe that the performers, they're the ones on the front line, really, not only with their health, with having the unprotected sex, even though it's tested, it's not foolproof. And they're the ones on the front line when it comes to the shaming and the bullying and everything when it comes to the discrimination against sex workers. But I think we are getting into, or we're in it, the shit show stage of OnlyFans. And you see it where you have the girl who's shooting 100 scenes in a day, which I laughed at it. I was like, the people from the 90s who were doing like the gangbangs of 150, 300 people, they're like, hold my beer. That's so cute with the, okay, you know what I mean? But then you have the one lady who did 1,000. And then you're hearing like she got pregnant. You're hearing all these crazy things. And it's getting to the point now where it's becoming a circus. Whereas when it was really booming in like 2019, 2020, and the early years of the pandemic, that's when the wealth shifted from the studios who were making all of the money to the performers. And rightly, I was applauding that. Now it's a bit oversaturated. And you've gotten to the point of, okay, now we're talking about the three-ring circus of OnlyFans. So that's not good for OnlyFans because it's just going to get more magnifying glasses on it and more regulations put on it, which would be the norm when things get ridiculous and out of hand.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you about the circus. I know the long running joke between me and my friend group is we're going to start an OnlyFans site to pay our bills, pictures of our feet or smashing cakes. So it has become this long running joke where people do mock it. Those of us that don't have anything to do with it or any experience on it. I've never gone on there. I don't ever intend to. But I agree with you. It's once you keep upping the ante, it's how far can we go? How far can we push this? And when we push too far as a society, we oftentimes find that regulatory agencies start to push back. I think that some things are better left to scale down so that people can keep them as more of an income base for them instead of it blowing up into all of these bigger fetishes and how many people can you be with in one day and all the drama that kind of comes along with that.
Let me extend on what you both said. I agree. Here's a little bit of what I think about OnlyFans. When it came out, my issue with it is we're not hearing young women, say, for instance, ask a 20-year-old, hey, what do you aim to be in a couple years? We don't hear like we heard 20 years ago, I want to be a doctor. I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a mother. They're getting into OnlyFans because it's quick money. My question is, where are the parents? I'm not saying that it's bad. Get on there and do what you want. My issue is things like YouTube and OnlyFans are taking away the imagination of people, taking away the hard work from people. I guess my issue with it is just it's taking away from the work hard at something, build a strong reputation. Now there's just so many girls getting into it for the let me post on my social media and show you all the bags, purses, clothes, jets, and men that I get all this free stuff from. Am I out of whack for thinking that way? Or do you not see any issue with all of that?
I agree with you. I come from a generation where it was work hard and take a little bit of a risk. It's not just about working hard, but you had to do that in order to make the big money. Whereas now it seems like the dumber the concept and the more followers you have and the hotter you are, the easier it is to make a mass amounts of money. Now, on one hand, I want to say, okay, work smarter, not harder. And I applaud it. On the other hand, I'm like, that's some bullshit. That doesn't work for me. And I have a brain that works. So I think people, yeah, they are aspiring to be influencers, to be YouTube stars. And I would have laughed my ass off 10 years ago if you said, yeah, a YouTube star is going to be a thing. I would have been like, what the fuck are you talking about? But here we
Exactly.
are.
Exactly. And the thing that upsets me the most is our young men having a really hard time in the dating industry because you have these young women that are doing things like OnlyFans, making 1 million a year, and you get the guy that'll go out, bust his ass to provide for a family that he wants to one day have, might not be that great a looking, but he has that will to work and always do something for his family and be something, get that degree, work hard, be like his dad, take over the business, go to the military. And only women just aren't that into it.
I couldn't agree with you more. I don't want to veer off here onto the whole influencer topic, but it's now become this cultural shift that we've seen where every young person has this delusion of grandeur that they can be a YouTube star or they can make millions on OnlyFans. And I think it's sending a very poor message to our young children, our society. I really disagree with the message that it's sending because Mr. Beast, he has worked very hard for what he has versus somebody on OnlyFans. I'm not trying to say that individual is not quote unquote working hard, no pun intended, but there's a vast difference in somebody like Mr. Beast who has turned this into a business versus somebody who would just prefer to stay in their home instead of trying to get a job, whether that's a work from home job or not, but aspire to be something. You aspired to be something as a young child and you were very into film. You just happened to transition into the porn industry. So there's still a lot of respect for you in that regard versus people who are doing OnlyFans just to get money to then show off all of the things that they can buy with that money, like what Farrah was talking about.
It's that instant gratification. That's where I have a problem. Vic, I'm sure you can agree. Like our families worked for shit. They didn't come home until dark. There was respect in the household between the man and the woman. Kids these days want that instant gratification. Guess what? You might be showing me up because I'm sitting behind a desk working 40, 50, 60 hours a week and I don't drive a Bugatti. You show your feet or masturbate on camera and get $500 wired to you. But at the end of the day, where's the respect for yourself? But when you got into everything, Vic, what was your biggest misconception that people have about the porn industry?
That there were people as professional as I was. I figured they all were, but that was the furthest thing from the truth. While there were a lot of professional people that made their flights and put their best foot forward and showed up with a smile on my face and wanted to do a good job, there were a lot that just shamelessly wasted my time when I was ready to have a day where everyone made money. And that usually was the biggest slap in the face to me. But yeah, it was just that was the wake up call. You have to really zero in on those that aren't going to waste your time because there were plenty that would do it without even thinking about it. And they would do it for a variety of reasons. Either there was a better job that was being paid that day, or maybe they were just so strung out and you had a mixed bag of all of that. So that was the misconception I had. But I found my legs pretty quickly. And I knew if you're a producer, you always have plan B, plan C, just so that you were insured to make your money for that day. Because I was at a disadvantage being in Vegas. People were coming in from Los Angeles. So if someone didn't make a flight, we would have been screwed and we would have made our money that day. So I had to think like a seasoned producer of being a pragmatist and solving problems as they were thrown to me.
So, Vic, do you think easy access to this adult content contributes to the rising issues like addiction, loneliness, or these unrealistic expectations in the dating world?
I think it definitely touches on all of those, but I think you have different cases across the board. Reality of the situations is that most people use porn either as an outlet to just get a nut out, let's be raw about it. And there's others who I've met who actually use porn in their relationship so that each other can get turned on. So there are positive uses for it. I also have heard the cases of those who sit at home and masturbate 6 or 7 times a day and they don't get anything done.
Honey, why didn't you do the dishes? I had a date with my vibrator the whole day. Sorry, honey.
Yeah. And you also have your genuine porn enthusiasts who go to the trade shows and want to take pictures with their favorite porn stars. It's an industry where you have fans and everything else. But I think that there needs to be, with everything, a healthy balance involved. And I do believe that if you are neglecting your personal relationship because you just rather beat off to porn, then I think you need to take action in that relationship, whether it's getting out of it or focusing primarily on your partner and going there. But I think you also see there's a lot of joyless marriages out there, and that is the solution to them instead of infidelities. It's a complex topic that I'm sure a lot of sociologists can dissect, but I don't really think it's a contributor to the downfall of society. or at least not yet. I think there's enough of a pushback to keep it so it doesn't get overrun in that regard.
Speaking of downfall of society, let's take you all back to the Me Too movement. Ugh.
Mhm.
Vic, how did it impact the adult industry? Was there any real reform or just performative changes?
So I started seeing it in late 2006. There were accusations being levied on Twitter where people flat out said, so and so raped me. Now, I don't know. That's not the method I would choose to use when outing someone, but there was a correction around that time where people in the industry who were known abusers were being outed. If you think someone's an abuser, do you hire them anyway? For me, it was no. If they're a piece of shit off screen, then I don't really want them around my safe space where we're supposed to be doing consensual, comfortable stuff for the camera. So it was happening, but I was finding it to be a little bit dangerous where even though we had all of these protocols in place, I was finding that the younger generation, those that were born like after 1996, who were brought up on iPhones and iPads and social media, they were having problems articulating when something was over their line or outside their comfort zone. For me, there was never really much of a vetting process on the younger performers. You would have some that would come through agencies. And if you trust the agents to do their job, you would say, okay, they're not going to put someone on my set that is unstable. But that was starting to happen. And when the COVID hit and the pendulum shifted away from the studios and the money going to the performers, that was when I used a term, the industry went meshuggah back in the summer of 2020 when the next line of cancellations were coming through. And there were performers that were being outed as abusers. And one of the performers that I was using was a guy named Marcus Dupree, who was Russian. And I'll tell you that he was hands down the strongest performer that I ever shot. And if I believed that there was a whiff of him being a abuser, he never would have been on my set. But because he was a big proponent of my scenes and I spoke very highly of him, that's when a dude like me who was trying to do everything right and be respectful was starting to get the shrapnel on these Me Too bombs. And that to me was a very slippery slope where the narrative of performers saying that they didn't call cut or stop or no, and this whole notion of them powering through was being validated by the company itself. And they were no longer really trusting my judgment on this. So that's when I was like, I think I'd made enough money and I think I've had enough. And I think this is why I'm going to leave. And that's what I did.
Yeah, okay. And that's why he left. Oh, I get it. And I probably would have done the same. So would Farrah, I'd assume. I mentioned Ashley Madison at the start of our intro. We all know that Ashley Madison encouraged cheating. Vic, what do you think about society? Do you think it's become more accepting of infidelity? Or was that site just exposing what was already happening?
I think that you have a lot of infidelity anyways. This just really shined the light on it. And then you had the people who ran that site. It was a big money grab for them where they didn't stop and think, okay, we could be doing something and we could be making a lot of money off of this, but should we? They just did it anyway for the money grab. But when you're asking, is infidelity becoming the norm? We're hearing about it on a lot of high levels. The presidency, and this was going on back in the mid 90s with Clinton. It was talked about a lot with Kennedy in the 60s. I think it's gotten to the point, and maybe you'll disagree with me, where it's very common. Now, should you do it? Of course not. And I talk about my infidelities when I was in relationships in the porn industry, because it was the time where the drugs started taking hold a little bit. I'm not going to blame them. I'm just going to blame it on the headspace I was in at the time and the person that I was dating and all of the temptations and the ease of just having carefree sex that doesn't affect anyone. And my girlfriend at the time was doing the same thing. So it was like we were both doing it, just really talking about it and just being scoundrels at the same time. But as time went on and I started getting away from the darkness and more into the light, and then deciding if I'm going to be in a relationship. It's not going to be, whereas I was trying the open relationships towards the twilight of my career, but now I'm in a monogamous relationship, and the thought of cheating or infidelity is so far from my mind because I'm so far away from the porn industry. And I know and I've experienced that hurt that it brings. I do believe that you really need to have your life path and make your mistakes to really come around and be like, hey, I think it's time to be a good person and a good partner and not do these things.
What do you think, both Cheyenne and Vic, what do you think the main reasons are that cheating has become so widespread? As we see, divorce is very high. We know that a lot of women, they want weddings, not a marriage. I think a man likes that feeling of trying to be in a monotonous relationship. But what do you feel that is at play with these things? Cheyenne, why don't you start?
Discretion. And I can speak for myself as somebody who was cheated on. I had absolutely no idea. I was heartbroken when I found out what was actually going on that I had no understanding of. The sites that were being used for these anonymous encounters and hookups, this was not via Ashley Madison, but another site. So I think anytime that we bring something to the surface and we make it such a big part of the cultural shift, of course, that's where everybody's eyes are going to go. I like that Vic brought up Clinton, although the mainstream media did a nice job of covering that, right? And I'm sure others preceded him where it was swept under the rug or it was kept more hidden. So I think we could say the same about relationships. And then once things get blown up, then that's when everybody wants to know about it and wants to know what is happening and what is going on. I feel that the porn industry, putting that aside, when we just talk about regular relationships, I do give a lot of credit to Vic where he said you have to make a decision to be a good person. And part of being a good person is staying faithful to someone that you, whether you're married or you're in a long-term partnership. I'm giving myself to you and only to you, and you're going to do the same in return. And we go back to that respect word again. If people are not happy in relationships or in marriages, then end the relationship, end the marriage, move on. You don't have to put the other person through infidelity. That's my opinion.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too is I think a lot of people get married very young. I had a lot of friends of mine who got married in their 20s. And my first question to a lot of them was like, yeah, but did you fuck enough? Did you have enough sexual experiences where you can be committed sexually to one person for the rest of your life? And I would see it a lot of times where they would cheat or it would end in divorce or they were always yearning for something else. And I'm talking strictly guys because most of my friends are guys. Why I was cheating in my relationship was so I was engaged to someone for I was in a relationship for 2.5 years. She was in the porn industry for a blip. When I say that, 6 weeks. And we got engaged. I was shooting porn all the time. And I thought she would understand, if anyone, having been in the industry. But I was getting accused a lot of cheating when I wasn't doing anything. And the truth was is that you get accused enough, you're like, I'm feeling like a guy who's being accused of murder that didn't do it. And if I'm going to be accused of it, why am I not doing it? And that relationship, I didn't cheat. It was the following one when the same accusations started to come in at around the same time in the relationship where I was getting accused of cheating when I wasn't. And this was when I started going into my cocaine phase, when the darkness of the industry started to swallow me a bit. And I wanted my cake and I wanted to eat it too. And she was a stripper and a former porn star and was doing extra things at the strip club that I had a sense of. So yeah, instead of us just being like, we shouldn't be with each other, we were just keeping it both hidden. And what I learned from that one was, yes, exactly what you said, Cheyenne. You should just bite the bullet and end it instead of just being a cheater because it does more harm that way. And I saw that firsthand. So that was my experience with that.
Now, I don't know if Cheyenne, you're familiar with the YouTube show. I think it's called Whatever, where the one man, it's like a podcast, but he always has about 6, 7 women. I notice a lot of the girls that are doing porn, or they're an escort, or they're just doing like OnlyFans stuff, more than I thought, have actually a boyfriend. And they say, oh, he's good with it. So, what you just spoke about, the fact you tried to have a relationship in that, why do you think that men are going along with this?
Every case is different, but you have to look at the guy himself and how ambitious is this guy? Is he okay? Could it be that he does enjoy the fact that his partner's going out and having sex? That does exist. It's not in my DNA, but I also look at it like some of them are like, yeah, I can sit home and play video games while my girlfriend's the breadwinner, and that's cool with me. But what I had found that a lot of girls in the industry who would have a carousel of boyfriends was that a lot of them were attracted to the novelty of it. Oh, I'm with a porn star, and oh, I'm having porn star sex and all of that. But eventually what happens is that gets stale, and then they start wanting to control a little bit, or they don't want them to be in porn, or they're trying to be Captain Save-A-Ho and get them out of it. It was always like a trend that they would be constantly dealing with over time. You have a lot of different psychological profiles of those individuals who are in it. The question I would always ask is, how long have you been together? Because that's telling on if it's 5 years, okay, maybe you guys found your groove. But if you're in for 6 months, 8 months, you're like, give it another 6 to 8 and get back to me because you don't know how long they would want to really put up with that.
Cheyenne, not to put you on the spot, but you had mentioned that you were stepped out on and he was going to site. Can you elaborate on that? And I guess I want to know how you found out that had happened. How did that make you feel? Because remember, we're talking about porn sites. Are they hurting relationships? Can you expand a little, if you don't mind?
Yeah, first of all, this is what the show is all about. We're going to tell our truth. This is my truth. And this was back in the early 2000s when all of this kind of came to an explosive me finding out. I was attempting to help him to find a new job. So he had given me access to his email. And listen, my current partner, Jay, I don't need to have access to his email accounts. I don't need to see his phone. I completely 100% trust him. He's never given me a reason not to. I don't allow what happened in my past dictate what's going to be happening in my current relationships. But when he had given me access to his email account, I was trying to help with sending out resumes and whatnot. All of a sudden, I saw this site and I don't remember the name of it, but it was all about meeting random people in random places and hooking up for a sexual encounter. And then that was the end of that. And then you'd move on to the next one. So I was able to access and see the profile that was made. Then I was able to find out how long it was going on for, and it had gone on for several years. So it was quite shocking for me to find out. And when I found out, I had just become a new mom for the first time, which kind of added an extra layer to everything. So it was a very tumultuous time in my life. And I wasn't really sure what I should do and who I could trust. I printed out these emails and laid them out on the bed and said, explain yourself. And of course, there was a million reasons of why. And first it wasn't him. And then maybe it was. And then this happened a long time ago when we were living in a different state. And I think that was probably the most hurtful part of all of it. It's just easier to tell the truth, face it head on, and accept whatever the consequences are instead of skirting around it and trying so many different lies that, now you're just a liar. So I'd never had accused him prior to because I didn't have a reason to, but I understand what Vic's saying. If you keep pointing a finger and telling me that this is what I am, then guess what? That's what I'm going to become. This was a case of this is just who he was. And in addition to that, I also found out that there was a very severe drug and alcohol addiction. So everything came tumbling down at once. And I think that's probably where my apprehension with the porn industry comes from, is from that situation, because I did look at those sites as porn or escort prostitution site. So I did lump everything in.
And I have to admit, truth, when I was with my first husband years and years ago, this was back in 97, 98. We all know that was when the internet came around. My husband at the time needed me to get into his email. He was somewhere where he couldn't access it. I got onto it and I found messages from a girl, and she was sending pictures and inappropriate messages. I was at work and I can remember the feeling of finding it all of a sudden hot and flustered and a cold sweat. And I couldn't believe it. I had just had a child a year prior. What I don't like about it is it makes you automatically go to, why am I not good enough? Even if that's not the reason, normally women are like, okay, what's wrong with me? So, with all of us being involved on each end of the spectrum, do you think the accessibility of porn and sites like OnlyFans impact relationships and dating culture in a negative way?
It's a tough call because dating now is completely different than dating 20 years ago when I was doing it like the old fashioned way with going out and meeting people. Each person is different in their consumption and why they consume. So it's a tough call. I don't know if I would say it's contributing to people cheating because I think that's always going to be there. But the accessibility of it, especially when you're dealing with mobile devices and everything else, it does make it to the point where if they're the type that's going to be watching porn, that's a conversation to have really in the relationship. And it really comes down to having a brutally honest conversation. If you're getting in a relationship with someone, how much porn do you watch? Do you watch it? Are you going to watch it if we're together? Would you want to watch it together? These are uncomfortable things to have. And some people might not want to be honest, but that's pretty much what it takes these days to be in a relationship where someone, if they're going to cheat, finding out the reason why they would and what's causing it.
Do you think that there's some sort of giving false hope to men and women? Say that they've watched porn for years, right? And they finally decide to get into a relationship. Vic, you've been behind the scenes, all the ass pounding, booty smacking, dick sucking, and all that. It doesn't happen every day, 6 times a day. And not every woman's going to want this and that, or this way or that way. So, do you think it fucks with some people's minds when they do get into relationships, and they've watched porn for so long, they expect like so much out of their partner, and that can create a little divide?
Yeah, I think like the reality is that I think people have been using porn as a trading guide and they really shouldn't do that at all because what I was shooting, what I was selling and everything else was a fantasy. What happens if you're a doctor and you have this hot patient or all of these scenarios that we would come up with? They were conjured up. They were written in script form. Most of the scenes I was shooting ended with a facial. Now, take a survey of most women, ask them, do you enjoy facials? And I would say the majority of them say no, and that they don't prefer that being the finishing move. But I will tell you that there are people who actually enjoy it. So again, it comes from the communication. Talk about this stuff. I think if there's a message for dudes out there coming from a guy who shot porn, was that do not use this as the how-to guide of lovemaking because it is so far away from being normal, being healthy, or being what your partner wants. And I can say there are people out there who are like, give me the porn treatment. But it's okay, here we go. But I've seen a lot. I have seen a lot just because of the business I was in. And I had, I guess, a pretty active sex life when I was living in Florida as a single dude as well. So you see a lot of things and you encounter a lot of different scenarios. But overall, I'd say that most would not view porn as an instruction manual for how they would want things.
Especially when, say, the man and the woman work. They both work a long week. They got kids. Even if they don't have kids, they work. Maybe some people's don't have that free time as much. I just feel that sometimes porn can portray that hardcore all day, every day, anal facials kind of thing. And it doesn't work like that. A woman's not going to want to be choked. A woman's not going to want to have a facial every time. She's not going to want to swallow every time. Where's the lovemaking to keep that bond strong, keep that love? Now, like you said, there are people that just care about nutting. The problem with that, though, is that women are more sentimental. Men aren't so much. Men just want to get a nut in for the day. Women are like, I don't want to just fuck you for 3 minutes just to give you something. I want to feel pleasure as well. And then you get the friction. Dads should talk to like their sons. If they catch their son watching porn, hey, dude, I just want to let you know it's cool that you're doing that, but don't automatically think that when you get married, this is what it's going to be like. Also, before you get married, go fuck around and have fun. Find a girl that does not give a shit. She doesn't even want your fucking number when it's done.
Been on this earth for half a century. I've seen a lot. I've experienced a lot. And I've had relationships that have gone completely sideways and have been toxic and dysfunctional. And being away from the porn industry for 5 years, I've gotten to the point where I'm the best version of myself. And the person that I'm with now, I think the message you should convey to every guy out there is make sure you give her an orgasm too. Because if you do, they're not going anywhere because you're giving them exactly what they need physically, but you also obviously have to handle the emotional side as well. You just can't be a prick that delivers orgasms. So it's important to have those conversations with your partner to understand what works for them and to deliver, because that is the key to a lot of secrets. It shouldn't be so difficult for guys to figure out, but sometimes it is. I would be in situations before where whoever I was with, they were irritable, they were bitchy. And it was like, oh, you just need to have sex. I need to give you an orgasm. Once you do that, you're like, okay, problem solved. We cool? Yeah, we're cool. I'm sorry. But you got to put the work in. If you're going to be in any kind of relationship where it's positive and it's healthy, you got to put the work in and you got to make sure your partner is happy.
I've had one question I've been dying to ask you. Tinder. What's your thoughts?
It's a dumpster fire completely. And this is someone who was on it. And now you have to be mindful of something. There was a time when I was on these apps, probably from teen up until I started being in my current relationship. And I switched to a bunch of different ones, but I was a guy in the porn industry and I had a lot of sex and all of that. It got to the point where I was like, I want to just meet someone who's cool and I'm going to put sex as that's eventually we're going to get there, but we're not going to get there right away. And Tinder to me was complete dumpster fire where it's all about, okay, quick bang. And I'm like, if I wanted to do that, I guess it would be okay. But then I started going over to Bumble. The women initiated the contact, which I think it was great in that regard, because if you're a woman, you don't want to be hounded by guys all the time. You want them to reach out because they chose you, essentially, to see if there's any synergy, really. And then I was not really digging that. Then I went over to Hinge. And Hinge was working. But again, it depends on what you're looking for. I was in situations where the girls were like, dude, you're not moving quick enough, so I'm going elsewhere. I'm like, hey, that's fair. Totally fair. Because for me, when you're doing that, sex does change everything, or it changes things, whether you want to acknowledge it or not.
I think that Tinder, it's a hard one because I'm not saying that people shouldn't have fun before they get married. Like you said, you were asking people you knew in their 20s, hey, you're getting married. Did you have as much fun as you could? I just find it's a dirty thing. I mean, look what we're degrading each other for. Hey, you're good for just a fuck. I'm not even going to know your last name. You guys meet in some dingy ass, or maybe somebody's splurging on a nice hotel room. I've never done it, so I don't know. And you're going and like, hi, how awkward would that be? Hi, how are you? Good, I'm here. So what's your favorite color? How does that even start off?
Yeah, and that's the thing that we're the younger generation. I guess that's what works for them. And I guess I can understand why when you take something as sex, which is supposed to be an intimate act, and you're just swiping for the nut, to be honest, when you're dealing with trying to navigate in our world right now, especially on the dating scene.
Let me ask Cheyenne, I wanted to know his thoughts on Tinder. So give me yours.
Wow, this is a great question. I'm going to be candid and honest. I met Jay on Bumble.
We were just talking about that.
I met Jay on Bumble, was also on Tinder, but Tinder was more of these random meetup and random hookup app. And Bumble was the female had to initiate by swiping first. And if the male had already swiped on them, then they would be considered a match. So it kind of gave the women more control over who they were going to talk to and interact with, which was a feature that I actually liked. But Tinder, in my understanding of it, was that it was definitely more for just those random hookups.
Yeah.
And let me ask you, not to, of course, I always say don't give information you don't want, but we were just talking about it and I've never used it, but how is that first meeting on Tinder or Bubble? Like, how weird is that to just be like, hey, you're here. Great. Yeah. Okay. So what do you like to eat? Or what's your favorite color? Or what's your favorite movie? Or do you guys just go in there and be like, you ready to fuck? Yep. Let's do it.
I think as far as Bumble went, for me, Jay and I had plans to meet up and go out to dinner, and that made me extremely anxious because that's a very intimate forum where you're forced to speak to one another. I agreed to it because I'm an extreme extrovert, so I could talk to the wall right now and be perfectly fine with. So he ended up canceling on me because he was very anxious about that. And I know, but he hit me up again and was like, listen, can we try again? And maybe we'll go to the movies. I thought to myself, movies is perfect. It will be limited interaction. If I'm really not feeling this dude, then I don't really have to talk to him. We can watch the movie and say our goodbyes. And he knows this story too. Everybody does that knows Jay and I. When I first saw him on Bumble, I thought he was very cute and he was into music. He's a bass player. And I thought, oh, that's awesome. He's got a lot of tattoos. Very cool. And then when I met him at the movie theater, I was like, upon that instant meeting, like what you're talking about, Farrah, when you walk up and you don't know who the person is. And I saw him and instantly I was just like, yeah, no, this is a nope for me. So I'm glad that we're going to the movies. And here we are 7 years later. He completely changed my mindset. He doesn't look like the typical guy, I would say the quote unquote, my type of guy, even though now my type is him. But prior to that, I guess I didn't think that it was. So that first interaction was very easy for me because it was at the movies and he did very much so win me over with his humor. But to meet up with somebody just for the sex component, work, like you said, hey, how are you? Okay, ready to get down to business? All right, let's do this. And then you just go your separate ways. That's odd to me.
Yeah, the percentages of the swipe and fuck were very low for me. But for me, and when you talk about Bumble, that was the one I was on. I always looked at the profiles. And if the profiles were sparse, then I knew that this person probably didn't have much to say or didn't have much to mention to them. So it would take more than that in order for me to even decide to get out of the house, to even spend the time to do this. But what happened with me was I would get to the point where you don't want to just do coffee because then you seem cheap. But on the flip side, if you want to pull the ejector cord early on, coffee's the perfect way to do it. Because if you deal with food and a meal, for me, a lot of times what would happen is I would see this person and I knew within 5 nanoseconds it wasn't happening. Yet, what do? Okay, see you later. No, we're going to sit down. We're going to have a meal. We're going to talk, chew our food. And I'm never going to see this person again in my life. And that's what the majority of what these interactions were for me. It got so bad to the point where I was like, I'm not even going to try anymore because I would already know where it was going, where it was headed.
That's a good thing that you picked out, and I didn't look at it like that. Do people go on there because they don't have much depth? They don't know how to talk to someone. They're just doing it this way, whereas, like Cheyenne pointed out, when you go on a date, you got to have conversation. And I think that's sometimes where maybe Tinder and Grindr and Bumblebee, whatever the fuck it's called these days, where they're all taken away from that part, where I think that's also maybe what leads into high divorce rates is because when you're not someone that can sit down and talk, hash a problem out, you're someone that just walks away or says a bunch of shit, or you're not caring for someone's need on Tinder. Not saying you, Cheyenne or Jay or anything, but I'm just saying it's giving like why do they just want to meet and fuck? Okay, maybe they don't want to get in a relationship. Okay, that's fine. But I don't know. It's just scary because is that where the next Jeffrey Dahmer is going to be? Like Head and Shoulders is going to be in the hotel room the next day in the medicine cabinet? Like, it's scary out there these days.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I do think that our society has taken this sharp turn where, and I can say, oh yeah, since the pandemic, since COVID, but quite honestly, we started seeing the shift before then where people started living within little islands of themselves, very isolated and alone.
Yeah.
The only way to meet people became going to these online apps. I remember the days, I'm sure both of you do too, and probably many of our listeners. You went out to a bar, you met a guy. You were bowling, you met a guy. You were at a coffee shop, you met a guy. You struck up conversation with people out in public. The easy accessibility of having everything right at our fingertips in these tiny computers that are our cell phones that we all are so reliant and dependent upon.
That's where earlier I was mentioning how the young women go into OnlyFans and men wanting to be gamers or going on YouTube and being content creators. I'm not saying there is nothing difficult about that. I'm not saying that or that they don't do well in what they do. Everything's just becoming so easy. Now it's, hey, don't strike up a conversation and learn about someone. Just go fuck them. And that's it. And then you get into relationship. The first time you're just going to be someone that walks out and hits and cheats on them, because if you didn't get what you want right now, you're so used to everything being instant gratification. Cheyenne, go into the other question for Vic.
Yeah, I think instant gratification, definitely. Vic, do you see yourself ever going back in any capacity, or is that chapter completely closed?
I pretty much nuked the bridge to the porn industry with the release of my book because it's brutally honest and because I don't talk about the porn industry in flattering terms. But no, I'm done. Look, it was an interesting existence. It was bizarre at times. I was very much aware of how bizarre it was, and that's what I wanted to capture with the book. But going back, I don't see how I could go any higher, nor would I think the money would be as good as it was for a guy who was simply a producer, director slash camera. But my feeling is that one, I was like at the top, I was like at the Mount Rushmore of porn. You couldn't really get any higher than that. So a dude like me, starting up an OnlyFans, being a producer, being a performer, in a lot of ways, I felt like it would be that I couldn't do anything else with my life. And I needed to be reliant upon the porn industry to make any kind of money. And I also felt it was a little sleazy too. Like you did so well going over the course of the year of the career without having to sling dick for a living. And now this is what you have to do to make money. Can't you do anything with yourself? So it was really just a matter of figuring out what exactly I wanted to do post porn. And that's what I've been trying to figure out at this point. Writing the book, promoting the book, that was all part of it. Could I write some more? I could, and I've started to. But I'm at the point now where I think I've won at life, where I'm retired at a relatively young age and I can enjoy the fruits of my labor because I literally was grinding through hell in a lot of ways. I liken my time, you've seen The Shawshank Redemption, right?
Yep. Love that movie.
Yeah. So when Dufresne escapes, he has to go through a tunnel of shit. I did that. So I don't want to go back to it anymore. So for me, it's done in that capacity. So it's more do things that are fun and really scratch that creative itch that I have from time.
I love it. And we'll be looking for more Vic for sure. I hope all you listeners had a great time in this conversation. I did. That's a wrap on tonight's episode of Social Disruption. And let's be real, this was a conversation that needed to happen. We tackled the big questions about pornography, OnlyFans, Ashley Madison, and got an unfiltered look inside the adult industry with Vic. Whether you agree, disagree, or find yourself somewhere in the middle, this is what Social Disruption is all about. Real conversations with no fear.
And a huge shout out, Vic, for joining us and giving us an honest look behind the scenes. If you guys want to dive even deeper, grab his book, Filthy, The Rise and Pending Death of Vic Lagina. Trust us, it is a wild ride. Did you miss any of our live shows? No worries. Catch the replays on all streaming platforms.
And follow us on social media at Social Disruption Pod on Instagram, Threads, Facebook, TikTok, at Raw Disruptor on X, and at Raw_Disruptor on Rumble and Truth Social to stay in the loop. And the best way that you can support this show is to share our show, share our episodes, share us on social media with your friends, family, fellow podcast enthusiasts. And until next time, stay bold,
Stay unapologetic.
stay disruptive.
Well, I hope you had yourselves a time.